Like to grab a seat, please? That'd be fab, and then we can crack on. Just a reminder of a couple of things. First to say, the book stall will only be here at lunchtime, but won't be here later on this afternoon. So if you intend to buy a book, purchase a book or books, then lunchtime is the time to do that. That'd be great. And also to say that all sessions have been videoed and will be relatively soon going on the Fresh Streams website, so you can access them, as well as notes and associated papers and presentation stuff. As much of that as we're able to put on, we will put that on as well, which would be a great prompt for you to have a look at the range of other things that are on the theology, in the sort of stuff that's on there from previous gatherings that we've had, some excellent papers that have been done on a range of issues, from creation and evolution, science, human sexuality, faithfulness to the scriptures, how should we handle biblical text, and so on and so on and so on. So there's a whole bundle of great resources there, many of which are very live issues in the life of the church at the moment. So do have a look on the Fresh Streams website. That would be fab. Now, we've come to our feedback panel for this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to our great council of wisdom and what they may have to share with us. So welcome in Kate on the platform. I want to invite Amy and Aileen and Paul and Nigel to come and join me. Come on. Give them a round of applause. Come and have a seat, yeah. We have 2 microphones. So they're all looking very circumspect about this. I don't know why. Perhaps you could just say who you are and give us a couple of sentences about what you do in your day job. That'd be great.
I'm Nigel Coles. I'm a regional minister for the west of England, which is south of here in more ways than one.
Great.
I'm Amy Waring, and I am Minister for Youth and Children here.
And I'm Paul Campion. I'm Minister at Shirley Baptist Church in Solihull.
I'm the Northern representative. I'm Aileen. I'm the Children and Youth Director at Heaton Baptist Church in Newcastle.
And we know Kate. Kate, tell us one interesting thing about yourself that we would all be really shocked if we knew about you.
Do I have to go for the shocked part?
Or
Yeah.
excited.
Excited.
Like you were once an Olympian.
Oh, yeah, I wish that was
No,
the case, but it really isn't. Okay, so something you don't know about me. I was fostered as a child from the age of about 6 to 12, between 6 and 12, down in Sussex. So I lived with 2 white families, in fact, one in Brighton and the other in Hove. So most people don't know that about me. So there's something.
We do
Yeah.
now. Yeah, we do now, and the whole of Christendom will know about
Yes.
that. But edit that bit down. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first question, and then we're going to pinch one of these microphones, and because Amy's up here, perhaps Steve can run around and we can find out what you want to ask these people, obviously connected into gospel as political and social liberation. But the question that surfaced in our group a fair bit was this whole thing that Baptists are a little bit, there's quite a lot of Baptists here, we're obsessed with gathered church. And we're constantly trying to suck people into the resources of the church, as though there's this sort of spiritual pecking order, that if you do spiritual things for the church, that is of greater value to God than involvement even in social justice issues. So Nigel, what do we do about that? What difference can we make? Is that true? Is that a fair reflection? And what can we do about it?
I really welcomed one of the things Kate picked up towards the end of your very helpful session in terms of pointing out that we are both church scattered and gathered. And I think what Kate was drawing us towards was that sense that when we rely solely on the ability to transform society, communities as gathered church, then we are, I think this is where you probably will go in if you had more time, we are limiting the impact of that. And so I think, what do we do about that? I think there is significant responsibility on those of us who are called to leadership in any capacity, but especially local leadership of congregations and churches, to really question the extent to which our ministry and our giftedness is geared around building the institution of the church as opposed to equipping followers of Jesus, whoever they are and wherever they are.
Okay.
That's the beginning of our answer, but it's, I thought you were going to let me hand the microphone on at this point, but you're not, are you?
These two guys work with young people and
Yeah.
children, some of whom want to change the world. How do we harness that?
I was just going to say something personal, actually. I'm great at talking about the poor, and I'm great at talking about, you know, how God loves the poor. But I read something really challenging. You may well have heard it. It was in a Shane Claiborne book, and he said, you know, you say you love the poor. What are their names? And I personally find that really challenging. I think that's a real challenge to the church as well. Is, you know, we can sit there and say yes, amen, amen. But do we actually know anybody? We'll probably give generously through our bank accounts conveniently by direct debit, you know. But it is about personally getting out there and getting involved and living life alongside people, and obviously encouraging our churches to do the same as well. But that's a real challenge to me, because you have to, there's a cost to that, and there's a sacrifice, isn't it?
So, and how do we, because there's a strong sense of justice in young people, without wanting to patronise young people. How do we harness that and not sort of suck them in to this machine called the church in an unhelpful way? You know, release them to fulfill God's call on their life. How do we do that?
So for me, what does that look like? Well, it looks about giving them permission to lead, encouraging them to lead, for them to understand that we're not calling them to be transformed to the likeness of us, but we're calling them to be transformed into who God is calling them to be. And so it's really easy, isn't it, when there's gaps on the rotas, and to go, wouldn't it be great if we had some young people doing this? I'm like, what for? Why do you need a young person to do this? So for me, I've got a great bunch of little activists in our youth program here, and I just joining in with them, letting them lead, letting them just listening with them and hearing their heart. And much of it is, they already have that big heart. They are a generation who wants to make a difference. They want to sit beside the broken, so much so that you have safeguarding issues, because you're like, we really can't do that. We'll be in trouble. We have to find safe ways. So it's about giving them those opportunities. Giving them safe ways that they can follow out those feelings from within, but then bringing the biblical teaching in with that. So it's kind of within them already. Very few young people I meet have not got that within them already. But for me, it's about teaching them, you know, getting the scriptures out with them and sitting and teaching them and saying, what's Jesus' heart? And how is that like the heart that you have? And how can we be more like that? And really trying to teach them, but harnessing where they're at and not trying to make them have a heart for this or a love for that, and not forcing them to be something that is either currently the latest thing or is the biggest gap in the church rota, for me.
So okay, Paul, how do we do something about this sort of I hope I'm not being unkind. I think it's a caricature, but there's this sort of spiritual pecking order and service for the Lord, which I don't want to downplay because, you know, we need the resources of the life of the church in order for us to do gathered church. But how do we liberate people and liberate our systems and structures so that we're freeing people up?
Yeah. Maybe an illustration from a couple of weeks ago, a couple who were newly connected with us and were inquiring about membership, and we sat down, talked together, and one of them has recently taken on a hugely challenging and responsible post in medicine in one of the hospitals in central Birmingham. And basically I said to her, I would see her primary mission role as being a Christian there.
Yeah.
And she is someone who has led home groups, who could lead worship, who could preach, who could do all the stuff. And as a couple, they would be gold dust in the church.
We'll sign them off you then. We'll have your good ones.
But I just felt that was her first calling, and that I needed to say that I recognized that was her first calling.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm sure she will have some contribution to make into church life, as will her husband, and they will both. But there is a first calling there.
Okay. Kate, do you want to have a little go at this one?
Yeah, for me, it's not either or, it's both and.
Yeah.
I think our difficulty within, particularly Baptist churches, actually every church, every denominational grouping, I find a similar challenge. Part of our difficulty is that we have landed at this point of gathered church, and for us as Baptists, because of the significance of that, it's almost like we can't pull away. So there's a lot of permission giving we have to do, which I think, Paul, you were talking about. There's a lot of permission giving, but it's not actually an either or. We need the gathered expression, and everybody has something to contribute to the gathered expression. And it's just working out what the weight of that contribution is. And everybody has something to contribute out there. We're all spiritual leaders. We're not all professional religious leaders, but we're all spiritual leaders. Yeah. And we can exercise that within the church context as well as outside. But giving permission to people to actually express the presence and the power of the kingdom where they work as well. Yeah. Remember, they're in church probably for an average of 12 hours for those who are really in it, really keen, they do something midweek, they do something on Sunday, but they're somewhere else 5 to 6 days of the week. And unless we're equipping them for that space and actually validating what they do in that space and saying, actually, you can make a difference there, not just by wearing a Jesus bumper sticker, but by actually helping to shape the structures. I love what you were saying about the young people. Again, for me, it's not either or with them.
No.
Part of the challenge that I see with younger people is oftentimes churches want younger people to take over doing what they've always done. So the older people just want some younger people to carry on doing what they've done. But actually, the challenge is to allow them to shape the agenda. So that actually the church grows and develops and becomes what it needs to be in the next generation. And if the next generation is going to be much more outward facing, the worst thing we can do is say, I want you to take over my job or my role or that role, and this is how you do it because that's how we did it 20 or 30 years ago. That's the role. These are the rough parameters. Make of it what you will. Reshape it.
Okay.
And we need to allow them to reshape the church.
Okay, we just pass that microphone. An opportunity for you to ask some questions or feedback or make some comments. Dawn.
Thank you very much for earlier. It gave me permission in my group to share something I've battled with for for quite a while. The caveat is, I do give to the food bank. I think that's a great movement. But my concern is that we're legitimising a system that actually it's okay for people not to have enough to eat. It's okay to rely on the beneficence of the few to actually deal with this. And that's quite a difficult position to hold in church, actually, because we all think giving to the food bank is great. But what we couldn't really get to was any ideas about how do we challenge the underlying, actually huge problem that makes that necessary in Britain today.
Who wants to have a go at that one? Come on, Nigel looks like he's poised to say something there. Breathing, yeah.
You're right, Kate. I was breathing. I was thinking, no, not me, Mark, not me. You know, I mean, I share. I've got the same question, and I've got no idea what the answer is. In a sense, it does worry me that within a church context, we'll say, you know, we need this for the food bank. We provide the list, and there's a sense in which we can validate people feeling as if they have done their bit under the poor heading within the kingdom by putting in a bag of rice and whatever else they might put in to dish out. And so my concern is really the challenge of what kind of community are we shaping? And I wouldn't hold back from saying we need to contribute to the food bank. But I think I would want to, if I was back in sort of that local pastor role, be wanting to try and challenge the value system of the church community. And dare I suggest, sort of nudging us in the direction of actually being a community of sort of, you know, Acts 2 kind of things, so that we at least take responsibility for our community, so that we do meet need and meet the people as whole people within that, so that the sharing of food resources may be a gateway into life in the kingdom, but it doesn't end with that.
We take young people every year on into the city centre for a mission called The Noise, and we one of the projects that we do is we always visit food bank. It's incredibly powerful, actually, for the young people to meet with people, to sit, have coffee with people, and just hear stories, share stories, and the power of the story is more powerful, actually, than the food pack being given out. So we do that, and our local MP came down and met with us, and make of that what you will, but the young people love it that he is interested in what they're doing. And we got slightly slated in the local media because they hooked onto the back that he was praising the young Christians for the awful political situation we found, or economic situation we found ourselves in, and we ended up with quite a long comments thread. But it's really interesting when you sit with the young people and say, what is our response to this? And it isn't one or the other. You know, we must never stop giving to the needs of people. We must never stop. You know, there are hungry people. There are people needing those parcels right now in this city, right now where you're from. And we must never, ever stop doing that immediate response. But that isn't enough on its own, is it? We have to, I mean, we with care, when we think about the work that they do, we have to be brave enough to raise up people within our churches and to encourage people to step into those arenas and take on the bigger picture, but not forget that the reality for people is they need food on their table right now. So it's both of those, I would say.
Okay, I'm going to stop on that question because we could keep going on that one, but I just want to pick up any other comments or questions. Come on, what do you want to talk about? Yeah, Steve.
Sorry, it was just a comment on the last. Do you guys not know, like, the joint public issues team, that the Baptists are in partnership with the other denominations and actually trying to work on this together as denominations, so they really do challenge into the authorities and the powers that can actually start to say, well, why have we got this?
Okay. Yeah, right at the back there. You've got a smile on your face that looks slightly sadistic.
I'm not answering this question.
Okay. Well, Paul's got the microphone.
This is for Kate, really. One of the questions I had, Kate, is that if we look at past history, it hasn't been the institution of the church that's transformed society. Now, when I was in local pastorate, we ran loads of programs of helping people back into work and everything else. History tells us that that hasn't transformed society. It's the individuals who are Christians empowered to do that. So should we as churches stop running our programs, this is going to an extreme at the moment, and actually focus on how do we empower the Christian to transform the area and sphere of society that they're a part of. Now that would be a huge transformation for most of our churches, because it's actually great to have all the picture of all the activities we're doing, because it shows us that we're doing something really good. But actually the individuals, history tells us, has transformed it.
Yeah, this goes back to the gathered and scattered church piece, and again, it's not an either or, but because we've emphasized so much the gathered piece, and also on top of it relates to what you were saying as well. On top of the gathered piece, we have tended towards the curative, the trying to solve a problem that exists, and you need aid. Just as Amy said, you need aid. Aid is needed when there's an emergency. But when the emergency is 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that there's something wrong with that. And we should certainly be giving aid, but we shouldn't accept it as normative. And we should always be askance and offended by the fact that food banks exist. So we can do that the compassionate piece. We've got to give aid. It's an emergency scenario. But actually, the other side of that is, how do you get to a place where there's wealth creation? You've got to pull in business people. Do you have business people in your church? Can anybody actually create a scenario where there could be some wealth creation? So most people want to do this themselves. They don't want necessarily to have people give stuff to them. But the other side, you're talking about some of the parliamentarians, like the Victorian parliamentarians, people like Wilberforce, et cetera, who needed somebody really to inspire him and to encourage him to go for it and to keep going for it when it looked like it wasn't going to happen. Wilberforce didn't change the laws on the slave trade. Parliament did, but they changed it because he was there. And he was there because there was a church who actually thought that's where he was supposed to be. So my answer to your question is, oh yeah, definitely, we do. And some part of this is about identifying. There's a few people that I'm working with who are in the civic space and are working in that space, and some part of it is about identifying and saying, okay, what can we do to make sure that you succeed in that space? That's the space you can make this kind of change with. If you're a business person, you can make it in wealth creation. If you're in some other space, you can do it this way. And that we actually challenge our people with that. And we actually have a wealth from Scripture. I just got started on the list of where different people were. There's so few priests and Levites in that list. I think Aaron's the only one who's mentioned. They're all something else, doing somewhere else. And God's working with each of them. So definitely, for sure. I wanted to say something else, but
Okay. Just one thing that's in my mind is the way the church has moved in its journey to become obviously much more open to see social action. And social justice is a different thing. Social action is part of the gospel. So John Stott's definition of mission is evangelism plus social action. What do we say to people in our church who say, well, social action is all well and good, but it's not really the gospel? Paul, what do we say to people in our church who take that view?
They're wrong. But social action without personal conversion is also not the gospel, because it has to be both. And in some cases, I think our commitment to social action involves people in such a way that they journey towards faith, other times they don't. Sometimes it emerges out of people's journey towards faith. And so I don't think there's a clear-cut pattern. But if our gospel is to be complete, it has to both be there.
So in terms of the programs and projects that the church does in community and overseas and at home, do all of our missional projects need to have some sort of form of a proclaimed and demonstrated gospel as part of them in order to be faithful to the gospel? Do they need both? Or could there be one rather than the other?
I don't see it as one or the other. Others may say differently. I think for me, a project needs to have clear purpose, vision, and values.
Yeah.
And through those, we express what is driving this. But nevertheless, that project may be very much open to people to be participating in it who may themselves not have faith, but they recognize the core vision and values that underlies what that project is aiming to achieve.
Okay, so how, just thinking about how to model and educate people to have a more holistic view of mission, just developing that thought. I just wonder, particularly for you guys who are practitioners with young people and children, how do we do that? How do we stretch their thinking in order for people to develop a much more holistic perspective on mission? What have you done? What do you model that enables that to take place?
Well, I think we've got to get out there and do it with them, haven't we? I mean, I know Amy talked about teaching and, you know, kind of doing the kind of biblical stuff with them, but that's got to be grounded in the practical as well. So, I mean, I've seen so much growth in my young people, so much more growth in actually taking them out, you know, taking them on mission trips to Eastern Europe and actually kind of, you know, meeting the people, you know, in need and meeting needs. And the way that they grow when they're doing that is just, we can, you know, they learn more about God in 1 week than they would in a year, of, you know, in church. That's, I mean, and I guess that's the pattern with Jesus. You know, he took the disciples with him on the journey. So I think we just need to create spaces to allow that to happen. I don't think just the young people need to be doing it.
No.
You know, it needs to be modelled by all of the church, and so often young people are kind of leading the way in these things, and they need to see their parents doing it, and they need to see the leaders doing it. So we just need to get out and do it.
I think the other thing we need to just be really careful of as well is that we're not teaching a them and us. And that to me is really important, because so easily you can do unto people who need stuff done for them. And you can accidentally teach that as the model that you're going for. And I think, you know, I predominantly work with children and young people, but actually we work with our friends. We work with people we love. We get to know people, as you say, what is this person's name? We sit with them, and it's not about what we can do for them. It's about how together we can make everything a little more like it should be. And that's very small steps, but it really does begin with actually knowing, like you said, knowing somebody's name, and them knowing your name, and understanding what your own needs are, and your own fears and your own hopes, and working from that, rather than finding a project that you think you like, that you can achieve, and going and doing it. For me, that's really important, that we need to start thinking about how we encourage people to sit alongside as broken people together.
Yeah, it might be slightly off topic, but I found sort of things like Messy Church really helpful in that. So whatever you think of Messy Church, but it's not just, we're doing this for you. We're kind of doing church together, and people who might not access our kind of normal sort of Sunday services, will happily come and sit alongside, and it's sort of forming friendships. I know Ruth, the Renew cafes that Ruth Rice doing, kind of those kind of projects where we are just doing life alongside each other and, building relationship.
These are good, aren't they, these guys? Wouldn't you like these people on your team, eh? Tough. Great. Let's some more questions. What do you want to talk about? Yeah.
Yeah, I work in NHS service delivery, essentially mental health, and I think just reflecting, I might be on an ego trip, but my jealousy when I go into my church and see on the broadsheet there's this regular feature on these couple in Thailand who are doing this amazing work. And I know they're doing amazing work, but I can't help but feeling a bit jealous, I'd rather perhaps see what I'm doing in the NHS occasionally, maybe. And I know in this church they used to do a feature, what are you doing on Monday morning, Rob? And you get them up and talk about it. So I think for me, strategic, it's thinking about integration. I have mad ideas. You need a psychologist on every church leadership team, for example. Certainly in big church, they should have a psychologist.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's something about addressing the cultural problem, say in mental health, this sort of isolation is a lot of the social model, the cause of mental health problems, and how do we really address the cause as churches and have that conversation around that is causing people to be having these difficulties? How do we change society, So this is what I was thinking about.
Okay, just... and we could respond and say some things about that. I suppose just responding to that, one of the pressures that I feel, particularly in a church where the expectations are high, is that there are those in our church here who feel that we've got to be the cure-all for everybody's ills, and we've got to be doing everything. So how do we... I'm not wanting to respond negatively to that, but here's my question. How do we discern the things that God wants us to do, rather than feel that we've got to do everything? Because if we're needs-driven, we'd just have a nervous breakdown. So how do we discern the call of God, and how do we navigate that? Kate, you've got the microphone.
Yeah, I really feel for you with that, and I think that is a big issue.
Yeah.
There were three things that I was going to say. I didn't have time to say them this morning, but one of them was to do with, as evangelicals, we are activists. We're doing, and we're pouring energy into all kinds of things. What we're not always doing is pausing and saying, is that the thing in front of us? Is that where Jesus is at work right now? So we're good at doing a whole bunch of stuff. We're good at starting a whole bunch of stuff. We're not good at stopping a whole bunch of stuff. And one of the things is about stopping stuff, so that we can actually make room for other stuff. But the other side of that is actually about recognizing what is the thing in front of us as a church, what is the thing in front of me as an individual that I need to be engaging and addressing, that we need to be engaging and addressing, that's on our doorstep. What is that thing? So that we're all doing something that is actually shaped around our church and our church life and our church culture. I think there are a few small things, though, that churches can do just to begin to shift the dynamics so that you don't feel so jealous in the future. There's a church that I work with out in East Anglia, and what they do is when people get new jobs, they actually commission them. They commission them as it's part of the church's mission, what they're doing, and so that those people understand that they are being sent. into those spaces, wherever it is. So it's not that everybody's individual thing has to become the whole church agenda, but it's partially about recognizing the significance of what everybody does. And, you know, so beginning of the school year, all the teachers get, you know, kind of prayed for and recommissioned, and people in the health services, you know, prayed for. So there are points where just that recognition can take place. But then the other side is, but what are we called to do as a gathered church? So we're recognizing the scattered, but what we called to do as a gathered church, where is Jesus active in our community? That's where we need to pour most of our energy in to. And if that means that there are some things we have to stop, we hate stopping stuff. Seriously, we will kill ourselves before we stop anything. But we've got to learn to stop some stuff.
How do we stop, Paul, doing things that we think maybe have had their season?
Please tell me. Because that's a very difficult one.
Yeah.
Because everyone will put up a very strong case as to why what they are particularly involved in is truly serving the community and of value, and it must be the thing that we do not stop. So I would like to know the answer to that, because I haven't got it. But while I've got the microphone, maybe I could also say that in terms of how we measure what we do and what other people do, I think from a local church perspective, church leaders' relationships with other church leaders are critical. So we need to have that level of openness and honesty with those who are near to us, whether they're of the same denomination or another denomination. So we have a real understanding of what other churches are doing near to us and what we're doing, and where there are times when, from the very beginning, we know that there is that actually we need to refer someone to what someone else is doing, or we need to be supporting what someone else is doing. And at the same time, they would connect with what we are doing, and we're not trying to do everything. But I think a lot of that comes out of shared, there are huge gaps in what we do, but when I think of what we do alongside what a number of others do nearby, then the picture becomes a little less worrying.
Great. Partnership, Okay, final question before lunch. Anybody else got any comments? Yeah, thank you.
I really appreciated what Amy said about young people and breaking down the them and us and enabling young people to be part of change and part of challenging what we do. How do we translate that into the unchurched adult? So those adults who come to the food bank, the asylum seekers and refugees, those from the council estate. Churches are very middle-class institutions. There are huge barriers from those people becoming part of leadership, challenging what we do, inputting into our morning service. How do we break down those barriers and enable those people to become part of or change what we do?
So part of that includes the devolving of power, doesn't it? From those traditionally who've held on to power within the churches to take a few risks in those arenas. Okay, I'll give you 30 seconds each on that one then, and then we'll draw stumps.
Well, I'd say first thing we've got to do is recognise there are barriers that we've put in the way and not their barriers. And so we need to be really honest and say, are we that welcoming? If I walked in here, what would this look like? And what are those barriers that I've put that are in the way? And we need to take those barriers down and take the responsibility and do what we need to do to remove those barriers. So that would be the first thing. There are barriers, not theirs.
Unchurched adults, I would say, trust the Bible and trust the Holy Spirit, and dare to release people in the church, to invite some of those people in to sit down, read something from the Bible, and dare to ask them, if this was the word of God to you, or whatever language is appropriate, what might need to change in your life, and allow the Holy Spirit to be in that context. Let him do his work.
Look for opportunities where everyone can be involved in one way or another, in something, some way.
yeah, I mean, just be open. We've had a young lady come along to our messy church, and she sort of timidly gave a suggestion, an idea, and it was brilliant. You know, she was thinking way outside the box that we just wouldn't be thinking. And then we actually took the idea, and kind of now that's rolled out in our messy church, and she really feels a part of that now. You know, that's one time we got it right. We've got hundreds of examples of getting it wrong, but be open to learning, and seeing outside the box, I guess.
Yeah, what I was going to say is very similar to that. Oftentimes when we see deprivation, we see need, we don't see gift and grace. And there's a very simple way of engaging with that, which is to ask, how do you see this? And how would you do it? You know, this is how I see it, this is how I do it, but I realize I might be missing something. How do you see it? How would you do it? And actually invite gifting, not just see people as people who need something. We need something, you know, and use a needs-based approach almost to outreach. You know, we're lacking this, we really need your insight and your help. How do you see it?
We're going to stop there, and we're going to have some lunch. I just want to say a big thank you to our panel, to Nigel, Amy, Paul and Aileen, and especially to Kate. Some of the things we've heard this morning there and over this time together are absolute gold. Absolute. I wish somebody had fed me some of this stuff 30 years ago, because it would have saved me getting into some trouble, I tell you. Yeah, the book, thank you. The bookstall is not quite, it's still there and will be there for the next hour, but do avail yourself of that. Go and enjoy some lunch. We're going to be reconvening at 1:45 for our final session, which will be great. I'm really looking forward to that with Elaine and Steve. If you want to get some fresh air and go for a wander, please do feel free to do that. It's not so exciting in the immediate vicinity, but there's always Tesco's around the corner. So head downstairs, and we've got lunch lined up for you. God bless you.